This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 1055, recorded on Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026. What's the Earth worth? Hey, everyone. Welcome to this episode of This Week in Science. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight I will fill your head with weather, cocaine, and tinnitus. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Just how much is all this worth? This planet of ours, this Earth. In 1997, our global ecosystems were valued at just $33 trillion annually, give or take some $17 trillion. At the same time, people globally were pumping out somewhere around 18 trillion, or maybe 28 trillion, or was it 31 trillion, as according to the World Health Organization. Later in 2011, people profit was thought to be around 75 trillion, while the planet was producing 125 trillion in benefits to people. That number, while shifting through time, decreases as environments are degraded by those activities that push those profits ever higher. How high can they get? Lest we forget that our future is tied to this planet. In 2024, nominal GDP was just 111 trillion. Our population is nearly 8.3 billion. There are so many reasons to value our planet Earth and to pay attention to This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science. Good science, Sarah. And good science, everyone. Good science.
Science is good.
Yeah. Happy Day of Science, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Science. We're going to have a great show ahead. Thank you for joining us. We're joined tonight by the Renaissance woman herself, Sara Kobilka. Blair is out tonight. She's sick, but a fellow fan of platypodes is joining in her place.
Love them.
And
I heard that episode.
You did.
I heard that episode. I was like, yes, I did so many projects in elementary school about the platypus, but the plural of it, that's hard. That's a hard one, right?
Right. And that episode, part of the conversation was, is it platypuses, platypi? And Blair said, nope, it's platypodes or platypodes. So, we're going to try and make it popular because we can do that.
Well, at least it's not a murder of platypus. Like, I feel like crows really get the short end of the stick by being a murder of crows.
I mean, I don't know. It goes with their very goth kind of
It got the vibe. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So,
Edgar Allan Poe agrees.
I know. Sara is the host of a podcast called Connecting the Dots with the Renaissance People. And so seriously, Sara, thank you for joining us tonight while Blair is out. And the big question, what makes a Renaissance person?
Yeah. So, of course, I'm a science communication trainer as one of my many, many things I do. And I tell people, don't use jargon. Don't use jargon. And then, of course, I use it as my title. But I'm going to throw out a few other terms that might sound a little bit more familiar to folks. So we've got multi-passionate, generalist, versatilist, which I personally like better than generalist, Jack, Jill, J of all trades, boundary spanner, or my personal favorite, walking Venn diagram. So a walking Venn diagram, like 3-4 dimensional diagram. It's overwhelming and it's great. I live an expansive life. I reject the idea of niching down or being right brain, left brain, which we know is a scientific myth anyways. And actually, I'm going to be talking about that with my guest on my podcast episode coming out next week on Wednesday. Yeah, but the thing about Renaissance people, there's kind of two parts to it. There's these people who like a whole lot of different things, but then quite a few of us Renaissance people also had a windy career path with lots of zigs and zags. So for me, when I was a kid, I was that well-rounded kid involved in all sorts of different things. And then like society somehow gave me this message that I had to pick my not true left brain or right brain. And so I said, bye, math and science. You were fun. I'll see you later. No, just kidding. I won't. And decided to become a journalist. But I missed math and I missed science, and 1 + 1 = 2, not how does that make you feel? And so going into broadcast journalism, it was very strategic for me to add another degree, which was atmospheric and oceanic science. And so then in college, I was able to not only be taking the journalism classes, but then I was also taking chemistry and physics and differential equations. And most of my journalism friends thought I was bonkers, but it really fulfilled me. I felt like I got to be multidisciplinary as a single person. Yeah. And so then I was a broadcast meteorologist and a little bit of science reporting throughout parts of the Midwest in Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin area. Then I said, getting up at 2 a.m, 5 days a week is awful. I hate this. I don't get paid enough to do this.
As we were discussing a little bit pre-show also, it's getting up at 2 a.m. to go to the studio, or sometimes if you're in the field reporting on the latest hurricane or flood or whatever, you have to be there with your hair done and your makeup. Right? Yeah. Full makeup, hair, everything. Like
combing my hair. Oh, it was
great.
Yeah, not worth it. So I was like, okay, got to find something new to do. And one of my favorite parts of the job had been engaging with kids. We had a weather academy at the station I was at, WXOW in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where we went to schools and we did live weather at the 5 and 6 o'clock show. And we set up the entire gym with all these activities. I loved it. I loved being around the people and the kids. And I thought, well, maybe something supporting the community. So I'll move into nonprofits, and became executive director of an arboretum. A little bit of a jump right there.
That is.
Yeah. Morning, midday meteorologist, executive director of an arboretum. And that was cool. That was fun, but it was a little rural and there weren't enough people. There were too many chipmunks and trees and not enough people. So then I said, I like this nonprofit thing, but remember that part about kids? I want more of them around. So the next place was the Science Center of Iowa. And that place is where I fell in love. Like if I could go back into any of my formal jobs, that's where I'd go, because I did camps, overnights, girls in STEM, portal to the public, which is something going around the country where I train scientists on how to engage with the public and became a science communication trainer.
Is that where that at the museum, the Science Museum of Iowa, that's where you became a science communication trainer? Like that's where
I first became
that skill set.
Yeah. And you know, in a way I was a science communicator on TV. That was my full-time job, but I wasn't really thinking about how to train people to do that. I had the experience of the best practices of what it was like to engage with the public, both on TV as well as when I met them out in public. But that was when I really trained on it. And it was such an amazing experience. I got to go out to Seattle all the time, which was fun, and meet people from science museums around the country. And science museum people they're such fun people. They have the best party. ASTC is honestly the most fun conference. ASTC is the best conference.
It's great. Yes. And for those who don't know what ASTC is, it's the Association of Science and Technology Centers. And very often, if you get a membership to a science or technology museum in your local area, if they are part of ASTC, you will get discounts at their partner museums across the country. So it is actually,
and internationally, actually, the passport program had, I believe Puerto Rico had at least one museum. There were a few places that were in international outside of the U.S. as well. So it was really cool. The Science Center, I got to even organize an Earth Day event. So Earth Day, very special as an Earth scientist, meteorologist. Yeah. So this brings back Earth Day memories. But my husband was doing his grad school work at that point in time, chemistry, organic chemistry specifically. Wow. So he was doing that at Iowa State. He got done and he wanted to do a postdoc. So that meant we got to move.
You moved again. Yeah, time to go.
Yeah. And so we moved back to where I had done my atmospheric and oceanic science degree at UW-Madison. And I got into higher education work there. And so I was with the Institute for Chemical Education, running camps. I was part of a really neat group called Science Alliance with people involved in science outreach around the campus. And we organized big campus-wide festivals, the Science Festival. We went to the state fair. It was a really collaborative group of people. And oftentimes when you're involved in science outreach, you kind of feel like a misfit within your particular department. You're the only one who
when
really
you get around the other people from the other places who are also doing what you do, you're like, oh, those are my people.
Yes. And you're just like, I'll help you and you help me and we'll do it together. And you build this like amazing thing. So that was really neat. That's also where I got involved with what is currently the acronym ARIS, Advancing Research Impact in Society. But back then it was called NABI, the National Alliance for Broader Impacts. Yep. And I got to present at that about a program that I ran in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club and Sigma Aldrich, where we brought college students to the Boys and Girls Club and did science club with them. And I just got involved with broader impacts and really interested in it a little bit at the Science Center of Iowa, but really nationally at that point in time. Then the postdoc finished. So we got to move again, right? And we'd already done the tour of the Midwest. We were from Minnesota.
Great. I can't wait to to apply for a new job. I'm going to do something different again. Oh.
Yeah, kind of, pretty much. Or actually, I'm going to find a Venn diagram, the center of a Venn diagram, because
all line up.
Every time we moved, for school by myself, I would go south because I wanted it to be warmer because I grew up in the Twin Cities and I was like, this is too cold. I don't like it. Go to college in Missouri. Then, got to be with my boyfriend, so I'll go up to Wisconsin. But then I'll go south again. This time, winner, chicken dinner, he took us down to Arizona. So he got a job at IBM and we moved to Tucson, Arizona.
Which is definitely warm.
Oh, I love it. The desert was great. I'm allergic to grass and red maple trees. So it was perfect, except for where our house was right off of a green of a golf course. So I was like, how did we find the one stretch of grass that's constantly watered? But oh well. And so we moved down there. And I had this national connections that I had made from being involved in Girls in STEM. I was involved with the Sci Girls TV show and got involved with the National Girls Collaborative Project. And I knew people from Portal to the Public. And I just put out all the feelers and ended up finding a job at Flandreau Science Center, which is the science center on the University of Arizona campus. So it was the combination, Venn diagram, right in the center, of Science Museum and higher education. And then I also ran a Girls in STEM program at a Title I school there for high school girls, where we brought women who worked at Raytheon, who were engineers and scientists, into the classroom to mentor, not just be a role model, but mentor for an entire school year coming in.
So they weren't just coming in and giving a talk and going, look at me, this is what I did, bye, peace out. We
were building relationships. It was such a powerful program. And we were talking about leadership and we were talking about women's rights. And it was really powerful. Michelle Higgins was the one who started the program. So hats off to her. She started it when she was at Girl Scouts. She brought it with her. And so I did that program. And then I also moved into a position at the STEM Learning Center. And that was the center on campus that was involved with helping faculty members writing their broader impacts, or if they were working on their career grants, helping them with the educational component, giving them both the research on it and just supporting them in general.
Yeah, and just for people who want to know what broader impacts are, they're great sounding words, research impact, broader impacts, and really they were started by a requirement of the NSF for people who got grants from the NSF to do scientific research, that they also had to have a little part that was like, how does your work, or will it impact the world? How will it have broader impacts? And so it has turned into an entire area of work, basically bringing that research. Like, it's not just a website. We're not just going to, but there are broader.
Or have grad students.
We have, exactly. I'll have grad students, but it has to do with education. It also has to do with outreach. It has to do with, community engagement. It has to do, more than just a researcher going out and giving a talk. It's that researcher actually engaging with the community in a really valuable way that can actually have ripple effects into communities and the public, but also hopefully feed back into the research itself.
Yes. And also I think it plays the role of, trust in science comes from that as well. Because instead of this scientist being this thing that you don't know, it can be this other that you're scared of. Instead, it's this person that you've talked to, this person who you've done a project with. And we helped them as we wrote their proposals, also be very thoughtful about not doing the drop-in one-off kind of thing that higher education is often known for. We need somebody, like, what community is poor and underserved and in need of stuff? We'll fly in, we'll be their savior, we'll gather all this data, and then we'll leave. And that's it. And we were like, no, let's build relationships.
Yeah, as opposed to, hey, let's not do communities, leave them in the lurch. Let's actually have an ongoing relationship that is strengthened with time, that is sustainable, that matters.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that was such great work. And again, that's another group of people who are my people. The ERIS conferences, I've gotten to go to a number of them. So much fun. And I love the work that they're doing. And it took what I had learned, just began to learn when I got involved with Sci Girls and Girls in STEM, and took that diversity in STEM, and it just kept expanding. Well, what does diversity mean? Well, okay, let's not just talk about girls. Let's talk about Black and Brown. Let's talk about Native American. Let's talk about Inuit. Let's talk about LGBTQIA2 plus. And it just kept going. And later on, I'm jumping ahead, but I also really got interested. Actually, no, I'm not jumping ahead, because I continued to work with PBS. Yeah. Oh my gosh. If I tried to like do a visual map of my conversations in one podcast episode, I said it would look like those spiders that NASA gave all those drugs to. Speaking of
a long time ago
salmon.
For the hallucinogenic spider webs.
Exactly. And you look at all those webs and they're all kind of messed up. That's what a Renaissance woman's conversation with another Renaissance person kind of looks like if you were to like visually map it out. But I was involved with Sci Girls, which is a show from Twin Cities Public Television, which is aimed at getting middle school girls to continue to be interested in STEM, bringing in STEM role models, creating best practices for engaging them. And then I continued a relationship with Twin Cities Public Television. And so I was involved with their Hero Elementary show, which was another one, which was about elementary kids and talking about science and engineering practices as the superpowers of science. It was a cartoon show, so fun. And with that show, one of their core audiences, they had a Department of Education grant, and one of their audiences was students with disabilities. And that was the first time I really got interested in disabilities and accessibility. And then since then, I've continued to learn more about that. And in fact, I gave a talk for the Science Talk conference on that very particular topic. So it's yet another expansive life kind of thing for me. But now I am in New York because IBM moved my husband from nice, warm, sunny Arizona.
So now you get cold weather.
Oh my goodness. And I'm wearing a sweater. So I'll show, let's see if I can get high enough without like knocking over my computer to show everyone. Over. So yeah, it's a problem. Okay. So I got, for anyone who gets the joke, my shirt says, "I love lamp." You may have to be of a certain age to get that or have seen a certain movie, but I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to force you to Google it. And then I've got a warm sweater on that has really puffy clouds on it because it has been cold. And we're going to talk about that later on. I'm not happy about it, but such is the North. But anyways, I'm in the North.
At least you have your puffy little cloud sweater that you could wear.
I'm happy. That's great. Oh, I can pretend the world doesn't exist. But anyways, we
my
moved
sweater.
up.
It's warm. I have clouds. It's
Sweater
good.
I'll live. I'll survive.
I love
We moved. I love lamp. I love lamp. We moved to New York when I was 5 months pregnant with my second child. Oh no, I skipped one thing. Okay. So when I was bored at the University of Arizona, I decided to get a master's of science in science education. But I didn't do it at Arizona. I did the online program from Montana State University. So I also have that degree on top of things. So back to New York. Back to New York. We're really into Hamilton right now in my house, and it's probably not appropriate for 6 and 9 year olds, but my daughter was talking.
It's
Yeah,
great.
well,
They're
it's
great
all
songs.
around
They're
us. It's
wonderful.
all around us where we live because I'm
Mhm.
like, well, you know that sign we drive by when we go to the place where you have summer camp? That is the sign that says George Washington's sword was forged in this town. And
Mhm.
like across the
It's
river, there is still the building where George and Martha stayed because when they
mhm.
had to evacuate New York City and go up the Hudson River, this is where they came to. So it's so local for us. It's the 250th anniversary coming up. I was bored last year and I became a certified tourism ambassador for the county that I live in. So I could tell you all about everything historical in Dutchess County, New York.
I'm loving the fact you've got all this stuff going on, all these things that you're doing, and then I got bored, so I
Come
became a
on.
historic tour
Well,
guide.
I herniated a disc in my back and
Okay.
I couldn't do all the exercise I normally do. So I was like, what can I do that involves sitting down? I can get certified as a tourism ambassador. Let's do it. Um, but anyways, when we moved
Do
to New York,
something. Keep that brain going. Let's go.
yeah, that's a Renaissance person thing. You have to keep yourself entertained. You got to have new shiny things to chase after on a regular basis.
Oh,
But when we
totally.
moved to New York, I was 5 months pregnant with my second child, and I had a almost 3-year-old in tow and a dog with seizures. So we moved all the way across the country. And I tried to find work at first, and I didn't find a whole lot of work. And then I gave birth. And then 3 months later, the pandemic hit. And so I was like, okay,
That
well,
changes
that
what
changes
that
things
changed the world for everyone.
for
Yeah.
everyone. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so what I like to say is I'd already given birth to a child. So in lieu of sourdough, I started my own company. And so that's when Renaissance Women Consulting came about. And so the neat thing about being my own boss, which was kind of one of those long-term dreams of mine, I didn't
Mhm.
expect it to happen when it did, was that it does allow me to constantly be changing projects. It allows me to be finding new collaborators and doing new, shiny, interesting things that interest me. Currently, I have a number of projects going on, but I teach a class virtually for the University of Arizona called WaterWise. And it is a
Right. Yeah.
course on visual science communication. And it is the perfect Venn diagram of my 3 degrees of broadcast journalism, atmospheric and oceanic
Meteorology. Yeah. Yeah.
meteorology,
Yeah.
and science education because we work with undergrad and graduate students and we create graphics for TV meteorologists to use to explain hydrology issues. Because the companies that make the graphics for TV have all these great explainers of like how do tornadoes form, what's going on up in the atmosphere, but they really don't have a lot for what's happening below the surface in particular, but at and below the surface and taking that like
Hmm.
slice out of the ground and saying what's
The earth.
absorbing, what's running off, what's happening with that water under the ground. And
Mhm.
so we actually have the meteorologists as our clients. They give us the questions that some of their audience might be wondering about. So the very first graphic that we ever created was answering the question of why do wildfires happen or why do flash floods happen after intense wildfires? And so it took us like 3 semesters. We had to hire a professional graphic designer because it was on TV in Phoenix. So it had to be really high quality. But it was so neat. And I got to pull from all of my areas of expertise, including
Yeah.
my knowledge of accessibility and thinking about colors and thinking about cognitive overload. What can a person really understand in
Yep.
the 30 seconds to 45 seconds that this graphic is going to be on TV? How are we going to
And
combine?
additionally, that if it's 5 or 6 o'clock news and it's TV and people are watching it, they're watching it at dinner time or
Yeah,
while they're getting home from work, and it's not their main focus. It's on in the background, perhaps. And so, how do
yeah,
you limit the information so that it is easily accessible and understood very rapidly?
exactly. And you'll like this
Limits
part.
confusion as well.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And we also had to think about the role of us people who talk with our hands a lot, AKA meteorologists
Ah,
who draw things with their fingers. And I don't know what would happen if I was forced to hold my hands behind my back the whole time. It might get really ugly. I would not be articulate, but they have a power of guiding your eye through the image. And so there's something different about making a graphic that someone is going to stand in front of on a
yeah.
green screen compared to a video that they're going to see. And so we have answered questions. Yeah, it's been really interesting. We've answered questions like, where does the water from the Colorado River come from? We've talked about how do we know that the current drought in the American Southwest is the worst in 1,000 years? And we did that in partnership with the Tree Research Laboratory on the U of A campus, which is so cool. And
I have spoken with one of the researchers there actually about their tree research. Dendrochronology.
Dendrochronology, exactly. And we had to try to briefly explain dendrochronology in like 15 seconds of a video, which was a super challenge. And again, took students like 3 semesters before we wrapped our heads around it. But that's
a great exercise for the students.
So fun. And they come away with it and they're like, wow, I understand like science communication and disability awareness and all of these topics. And it's a class I teach via Zoom, with the exception of 2 times a semester. I fly down on a Thursday, I teach class Friday and Monday, and then I fly back on Tuesday. And that's written into the grant because I need my Arizona sunshine. And
like I can't just do this over Zoom forever.
No, because I see them wearing their tank tops, and I'm like, I just grabbed another sweater. It's sweater weather here, and I'm freezing.
And they're just not understanding.
They don't get it. No, they're like, oh, it snowed once 4 years ago. It was so fun. We made a snowman that was like 5 inches tall, and I'm like, that's cute. But it's fun. They learn how to work virtually. We work through Google Drive and Zoom, and they have to be in teams. And so they come out of this class as 1 credit. So we don't make them do a ton of work, and we meet twice a week for 1 hour, but we get so much out of it. And we have a free, which anyone can join, visual science communication seminar series on Zoom that we do 4 Fridays each semester. Nice. And we bring in people to talk about any and every topic. So we had some speakers this semester who were talking about math accessibility in Microsoft 365. Like, if you think about it, if you were blind and you had to have a screen reader read you advanced math, how would that even work, right?
How do you and you're like trying to be okay, how do I what is it, PEDMAS? How do I apply like these the order of operations if it's in the dominant? How do you how does that get read and understood?
Project. And they've been working on it. Microsoft 365 has been working on that and has been constantly releasing new things that are available through their projects. So they talked about the effort, and it came about because of a woman, Sara Schunkweiler, who's from Johns Hopkins University, Eileen Dixon, who was a student of hers who became blind when she was in, I believe it was either her late teens or her 20s, or no, it was her 20s. She was in college studying to be a nurse. And they kicked her out of the nursing program because they said she was a liability because she became blind.
And so she said, well, let's change it so that nobody else will be a liability.
She was a disability advocate. And then they worked with Peter Wu, who is at Microsoft. So that's great. We're going to be uploading those onto YouTube as well, onto our WaterWise channel, once I can get some students on the ball with that. And so that was like one of our topics. We had another person who came in, or a pair of speakers who were from our computer science department, who were talking about 3D visualizations, both physically printed 3D visualizations of data, but also displaying it on a planetarium. And fun. They were showing us what they did for the phylum and organisms, and like how you could go through the entire tree of organisms in this 3D rendering that you zoomed in and out of like you were traveling between planets, but then there were pictures and it was integrated and you could see the lines. So
I'm imagining some of the phylogenetic diagrams of like the evolutionary radiation of birds, right? And so they very often now they use a circular display format for these phylogenetic presentations. And I'm just imagining how neat all those lines and colors would be put on a dome and taking advantage of that 3-dimensionality.
And you can zoom in and you can zoom out and you can have pictures come up when you get zoomed in closer and labeled. Like,
oh my gosh.
Cool work. Yes. So
Now
cool.
I want to see the whole world of birds inside of a dome.
Yes. Yep. Planetarium, Science Museum's cool place, my happy place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that class is cool. And our big project this semester and the upcoming semester is we had the National Weather Service in Tucson reach out to us because they had gotten an idea from a local meteorologist. They were talking about, okay, there's too many people coming to Tucson and central Arizona and dying from our weather. They're primarily dying from the heat.
From the heat. Yeah.
Heat is the number one killer. More than 400 people a year are dying from that. And not just homeless people either.
No, and very often now we have these we're getting more extended periods of hot temperature where we don't have the nighttime cooling that we used to have. And so we don't have the same like allowance for our physiology in these, like the Southwest, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And so we're doing things about that. We're talking about flash floods. As I mentioned before, you've got those burn scars, and we got the mountains that surround Tucson, and there's mountains all over Arizona. And we create graphics that are also not Arizona specific. They're ones that could be used in California, could be used in New Jersey, where we had big fires last year. They're designed to be more broadly used. But for the airport, we're creating signs and animations about heat, flash floods, and we're calling them dust storms, but they're
haboobs. The haboobs.
Haboob is one of my favorite words.
I love that word.
Haboob and graupel are my two favorite atmospheric science words.
What was that second one?
Graupel. Have you heard of graupel before?
No. What is graupel? How do you spell this?
It is Graupel. And so graupel is a type of ice pellet. So there is specifically ice pellets, and there is hail, but graupel is another one. And all the different types of precipitation that would fall from the sky, they all depend on the temperature profile and the humidity profile. So if you send a balloon up into the air and it's measuring temperature and it's measuring humidity, both of those values are changing as you go up. And sometimes they're getting really close to each other, and sometimes further away, and sometimes above freezing, and sometimes below freezing. And what that profile looks like dictates the type of precipitation that is going to fall onto your head or your car or anything.
So like the size of the hail.
The size, the shape, the pattern, the type of snow you get is very dependent. There's so many different types of snow. It's platelets, you get the very thin needles, you get the actual giant snowflakes, and that is all dependent on that temperature profile of what is happening in that lowest level of the atmosphere from the cloud where it's initially falling from, which is always going to be ice because it gets colder as you go up higher. It's always going to be ice first, but does it melt and then refreeze and then melt again and then refreeze again? And
so that's the graupel.
So graupel has kind of like a mixture of different things happening.
Okay. It's that environment
It's that environment. Yeah. It's something so Renaissance people love diving down a rabbit hole.
Oh yeah. This is going to be a rabbit hole later. I'm just telling you.
Weather. Okay. So I call weather the gateway drug to STEM because I can talk to kindergartners about it. I can talk to 93-year-olds with dementia. I can talk to a 3-year-old, and graupel and weather is tangible for all of us. We've lived through it. It impacts our lives every single day. We have stories, we have emotions that are tied to it. And just promise me that if you ever see me, that you don't try to do like small talk, like at the grocery store about the weather. Because it's not going to be out there, and I'm like, actually, the scientific average high for this time of year is, we don't do well with small talk, or if we do it, we're biting our tongue so hard that it's bleeding in the back of our mouth. But so that U of A class is a big thing. I'm also moderating webinars for ACS, the American Chemical Society. And then I really am doing a lot of work to try to help my fellow Renaissance people to live their own expansive lives. And so some of that I do is through some career coaching and helping them think as they're transitioning. Maybe they want to make a big jump and they don't have the words to sell themselves and explain and translate why their skills from one area are applicable in another. Like, why could you go from being morning meteorologist to being executive director of an arboretum? I made that cell. And it's about translating. And I actually use a lot of my
Skill
science
translation is
communication.
amazing.
Yeah, my science communication skills of like, think of their language, what is their jargon, all that. And then I also am just building up my Renaissance people community, brainstorming, what are we going to do? We're going to get together. We just did an event last week called Brain Dump. And so what it was we Renaissance people get all these ideas. We get these sparks of information. And some people have Post-it notes everywhere. Some people like myself, I start a Google Gmail draft with ideas and URLs, and I plug stuff in there. And then my draft folder becomes like 200 things, and I never clean it up. And I felt like spring cleaning. And so I was like, let's work for 40 minutes.
Let's work on some of these things together.
Yeah, let's just take all that stuff, figure out what we're going to do with it. We don't have to do this thing. Let's figure out what we're going to do with it. I gave a little like organizational structure, but it was just doing it with someone else, having someone put that on your calendar.
Somebody do it. Yeah. Sometimes when we're working on ourselves, it's great for focus for ourselves, but other times it's like, it'd just be nice to sit next to somebody and have someone else.
You need an accountability partner. Exactly. You just got to have somebody else there. And then the podcast is like my baby, other than my human baby is. And so that's.
Is there a certain day of the week that comes out?
It comes out every other Wednesday. So next week, Wednesday, it will be releasing and
connecting the dots.
Yes, connecting the dots with the Renaissance people. And I capitalize the T in the Renaissance people to make it.
And you have to pronounce it like it's capitalized.
That's right. And I've actually had my first guest and I want to say third guest were both science communicators. And the one coming up is Paula Croxon, who is a science storyteller, neuroscientist. You may have heard of her.
I have. I know her well. Well, not well. She's in New York. I'm over here on the West Coast.
So her episode is coming out, and we talked science storytelling, and it was perfect. So many great things. And then, that's just my work side of things.
And then there's like the life.
The other me. So in the last 2 weeks, I've hosted a murder mystery party, joined a singer circle for women and treble voices that was focused on justice, participated in a play reading with a lovely group of senior citizens in a Poughkeepsie social reading club, which I was told has been in operation since the 1800s.
That's amazing.
I saw Mamma Mia at the local high school, and I started seeds for my garden, which are currently sitting in the window, hoping to go outside again.
They're not outside, right?
Nope, no babies outside. I know not to do that. And put out compost in my garden and got just like covered in mud. I'm going to share a Facebook picture because I'm just covered in mud. And then I'm continuing to work out in hopes that I can start teaching group fitness classes again sometime soon. So that's
Don't slow down. Don't slow down. Just keep going as long as you can until you can't anymore. I mean, come on.
You got to live expansively, right? Life would be boring. And not to say, like, I feel like I'm making up for lost time because this winter was the worst winter ever in terms of like every illness coming through our family.
Oh, it hasn't been. Yeah.
Snow days.
Winter can be, I don't know. I feel like ever since, it's been 15 years now since I had a child. I've been sick a lot.
Disease vectors. They don't share anything except for the diseases that they bring home.
Yeah.
But sharing is caring.
Finding out about what you've done and who you are is just, I mean, you're doing so much and it's amazing. And I love the way that you are leaning into that aspect of yourself and helping other people also come on, we can be interested in lots of things. We can have different focuses and we can have so many bits of knowledge that we tie together. And I think, and the part that of course I love is that so much of it is around science and science communication. So
that's huge.
But we do have science stories to talk about.
Let's do that.
Do we want to talk about the science stories?
Well, they involve drugs, they involve weather. What's not to like?
I know. So I've got news about the Earth. We've got some climate. We've got plants. We've got monkeys, kind of tangentially, birds.
Monkeys and tangents.
All sorts of things. Yeah. I've got salmon on cocaine and some new DNA tricks. What did you want to talk about tonight?
Okay. Well, seeing as we discussed, I may be the very first meteorologist you've ever had, so we got to talk about the weather, right? So we'll talk about the weather, and then we're going to play a little mini version of Connect the Dots. And we're going to connect the dots because Paula and I were talking a lot about science and storytelling, and we're going to connect the dots between a couple of research articles about the science behind storytelling.
Perfect. I love it. And I have come across at least one of these articles on my own journeys, and I think it's a fantastic one to talk about. So I can't wait to dig into this stuff with you. As we jump into the show for everyone here tonight, I do want to remind you that if you have not yet subscribed to TWIS wherever we're found, we stream live weekly Wednesday evenings, nights, 8 p.m. Pacific time-ish. Sometimes we're a little more later, earlier, whatever. Ish is the ishiness. On Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. You can subscribe to us there. You can catch us there. You can watch things later on the channels. You can also subscribe to our podcast wherever amazing podcasts are found. And you can find our show notes and other information about the show at twis.org. Help us out. Share TWIS with a friend. All right. Are we ready to dive into the science? Are you ready?
Splash.
Woo! Whee! Whee! Let's go. So I wanted to start with, since this is kind of an earthy day themed show, very earth focused. I wanted to start out with a story that just came out related to the wonderful AMOC, or the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Now, the AMOC, good one. It's a fantastic one, and it is, if anyone can remember that wonderful movie from 2004 that was like our favorite, most hated climate disaster movie, The Day After Tomorrow, was based
It came out while I was getting my degree in atmospheric science. So the department, some members, this was not officially department, but we got together and we used the movie as a drinking game for any time things were scientifically inaccurate and dangerous.
I think I actually might have done something like this as well, separately.
There's a few of them. Yeah.
But in line with this, let me just start off our program with a little quote from the movie. Oh, I didn't.
We've found something extraordinary and disturbing. That is, you recall what you said about how polar melting might disrupt the North Atlantic current?
Yes.
Well, I think it's happening.
Folks, you hit some...
And I love that clip from the movie.
You know what? Fun fact, though, they show a map of that. So they go in and they show them. It's like on the screen. It is literally pointing in the wrong direction.
Yes. So
who was their science advisor and how did they not catch that?
So through the years, and it was maybe after movies like this came out, the organizations like the Science Entertainment Exchange in Hollywood started trying to focus on bringing experts into connections with those Hollywood storytellers, so that we actually got for what was the name of the movie with Matthew McConaughey? Was it Matthew McConaughey? And he went off into
a black hole.
Would he? Yeah, he went like into a black hole or whatever, and it was the most
Interstellar, right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
this is what I need a co-host for. No, so Interstellar had one of the most accurate depictions of a black hole as we understood from theory, because they brought physicists from like UCLA and other universities together with the directors of that movie to make it look really good. And then we actually saw a black hole, and it's like, oh my gosh, it looks exactly like that. So that's the benefit we get of bringing scientists into storytelling, so it doesn't break the fourth wall when people who know things are watching the movie. We don't have to turn a movie into a drinking game. But in the movie, 22 years ago now at this point, the idea was that the Arctic was melting, all of the glaciers and the ice and everything melting into the Atlantic Ocean, the North Atlantic Ocean. And so it was changing the makeup of cold water and warm water and how the thermoclines work. And so it was going to create a situation in which things became more balanced. And so as a result, you don't have the pressure gradients, or in this case, the temperature gradients that move the salty water to the less salty water, to the warm water, to the cold water, and all that kind of stuff, and mix things up. And the mixing is really important. We go from the east to the west. I have a graph on the screen right now. Sarah, is this more accurate?
That's looking a whole lot better. Thank you. I do have a glass to have a drink, but it was empty, and it's okay because I don't need to take a drink for this one.
No, you don't have to drink for this one. No. But the temperatures, and we have the mixing because you have the deep cold water that brings cold up into the places. And so because of the movement of the water, it interacts, and maybe you can explain this a little bit better than I can, but it interacts with the atmosphere and also impacts the climate that we have on the East Coast, in Europe, in Northern Europe. So the cold and the rainy, the drizzly rainy days of London, that's because of the AMOC.
Yes. And it's also part of the reason why when people from, say, Norway and Sweden migrated to the United States, a lot of them settled in the Midwest. I am the child of Norwegians who settled there. And you'd think, wait, that's the 45th parallel, that's south of the 45th parallel. Why are these people from such higher elevations saying, hey, we found a place that has a similar climate that we're used to surviving?
Mm-hmm.
It's because of that. Basically, it's the opposite effect. So in the United States, we have colder conditions further south. And then and then in Europe, there's warmer conditions further north than, if we had no sort of circulation going on.
Yes, this makes sense. And so that's why it's a little bit shifted when we think of the map. And it doesn't just go straight across versus the equator, right?
You can't look at the line of latitude and be like, 45 degrees. Oh, it must be the same in Europe and in the United States.
And not necessarily. Yeah. So, but when the movie came out, Day After Tomorrow, when it came out, climate scientists were saying, we're a little concerned about the weakening of the AMOC. And though they had done some measurements and they had some simulations, and they're like, yeah, it seems to be weakening. And now 22 years later, we have more data. And in fact, the paper that just came out in Science, which one is it? It is in Science Advances. So it's actually open, so anybody can read this paper. This paper is meridionally consistent decline in the observed western boundary contribution to the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. So they have taken over 20 years worth of data from a number of different mooring arrays that have been positioned by different research groups. So there's the Rapid Scotian research that is at 42.5 degrees north, the Line West, 39.5 degrees north. We've also got the Rapid array that is at 26.5 degrees north, and then what's called the MOVE, Meridional Oceans Variability, something or other, at 16.5 degrees north. And so they took the data from the measurements of all these different mooring arrays, which are, basically they're instruments that are moored to certain subsurface elevations within the ocean. So they go down below 1,000 meters, below and relative to 1,000 meters, to be able to measure what's happening. And what they found in this study is that, yes, indeed, there's a weakening signal. And it just supports other evidence that we have had for years and decades. There's a weakening. The big thing that this study finds is that we're finally doing real observations over decades, as opposed to having short-term periods of measurements that are being extrapolated into models and simulations. And also, they're not separate. They're taking all of the model mooring arrays, putting them together, and they've been able to determine that that east to west and then north to south current, the western part is actually indicative of the majority of variation in the AMOC signal, and that there is variation in the eastern proportion that does kind of fix. So like where it's weakening a lot on the west, that eastern part actually is making up ground a little bit. But the western part that they're measuring, they're calling the canary in the coal mine. And that we actually now we have a place to be looking to really understand what is happening and how fast it's happening to the changes in the AMOC.
And what I'd add to this is, as a person who has been on TV in the public talking about weather, talking about climate change since the mid 2000s,
since Day After Tomorrow.
Since the day after tomorrow. Yes. That's when I graduated. So anyways, for people who have been climate deniers or climate change deniers, one of the big arguments that they have liked to give is that, well, it's changed in the past. It's gotten really cold. We've gone through ice ages. We've gone through other things. And the AMOC has collapsed in the past. This is not the first time it's happened. This is not the first time that it has weakened. But one, do you really want to live in an ice age? Like, do you really want to go to the extreme that our climate has gone to in the past when these types of events have occurred?
Yeah, it's not going to happen like Day After Tomorrow. You're not going to get like a giant tidal wave and instant freezing of New York City. Yeah. That's not happening.
Not true. The stratosphere is not going to come down and immediately kill you. That's my favorite. I laugh so hard at that. But and then the other thing is, like, synonymously, you think of the hockey stick of the carbon dioxide increasing in the atmosphere. And they say, well, carbon dioxide has increased in the atmosphere. Things have changed before. Yes, they have changed before, but it is the rate at which the change is happening now that is the concern. Yes, temperatures have gotten hotter in certain time periods. We have the Dust Bowl. They've gotten colder. Yes, climate changes. It's not a stationary set thing. It is the rate at which it's happening and how much evidence we now have of the role that we as human beings are playing in making that happen and getting to that tipping point that we oftentimes talk about of there's no going back. Once we get to a certain temperature, there's certain things we just can't get back.
Yeah. And, there are some people who will, argue, well, people are going to survive. We adapt. We're able to do all sorts of things.
There's planet B out there. We'll just transfer there, right?
But it's not exactly that. I the way I want to come back from this is if it's happening really, really fast, that family, that generational farm that you have might not have water anymore. Or maybe the conditions to grow all of the food crops that you had decided to grow, you can't grow there anymore. So we also have, companies and individuals, even universities, investing massive amounts of money in agricultural land. Like Central Valley, California, where I come from originally, almond orchards, right? It's all of these investments in certain crops and some of them are very long-term investments as well.
Hope the bees don't go away.
Right. And so then you have environmental change that changes weather patterns that, as over time, it changes climate, it changes water availability, it changes salinity, pH of the soil. And suddenly we start to have a problem within our national food security. And people who own businesses have a problem staying solvent. So this is all tied together. Right?
And the other thing is that when it comes to climate change, if we look at, for example, sea level rise as an example, the people who are going to be most deeply impacted by sea level rise are some of the poorest people on this planet. They're the people who have it so hard already, who are barely surviving. They're the ones who are most likely to get hurt by that. People with disabilities are the people most likely to get injured or killed when a natural disaster happens. if we have an ounce of care for others who maybe are struggling or anything, it's just like, really? I have a coffee mug downstairs, and when you put coffee or some hot beverage in it, the shorelines disappear to what they would be with like a 1 foot sea level rise, and it's really depressing. I don't actually use the mug because it's kind of depressing to drink from, but
I need to have
not
a nicer mug that
exactly.
inspires
I do have a
me
world's
every
best mom
day.
mug. Yeah, I use the world's best mom
Yeah.
mug I got from the kids.
I
But,
fill mine
like,
with wine. It makes
yeah.
everything better.
It's all better. Yeah, but it's not just what we see on TV of these like mansions in California where the ocean side is crumbling and like, oh, boo-hoo to them, that sort of thing.
Oh, there's, I mean,
It's so much broader.
we could be bringing back Dust Bowl days. We could have, there are so many issues that, you know, if we can't keep up, we're going to, we're going to be dragged along, and we'll see.
And we
what
had a mini experiment too when COVID-19 shut down flights and transportation and all that sort of stuff. And we got to see just a little bit of what the impact could be if we took fairly drastic measures.
And I really thought that it was going to change the way that people did things, but
they love seeing those dolphins in Venice jumping through the waters.
I haven't seen the resilience and sustainability stuff get better, but
because we want to do the easy thing. We have to be pushed to the edge, and then it's like Climates of Collapse by Jared Diamond. It either you have to be pushed to the edge.
That story, yeah.
It's scary stuff. It's not the habits,
maybe,
which is why
because humanity is a bunch of procrastinators. I don't know. Like, I'm an ostrich procrastinator. I mean, what does that mean?
And that's why the next generation has such eco-anxiety. Like they actually talk about that. But a project I got to be part of to address that, which felt really good, was PBS Learning Media. You know, one of those many different projects I had that lost all of their funding in the last year and a half. But anyways, they were doing a project where they wanted to take their archive of all these amazing videos that they have made over the years, create curriculum that could be used in middle school and high school classrooms that was about people making a difference when it came to climate and climate research and ecological stability and all that sort of stuff. And so I got to do a couple of projects for them on that for middle school and high schoolers. And so we have to find ways to give hope to the next generation, because it's not, well, think about your grandkids for them. It's what's going to happen when I'm like 20. What's going to happen when I'm 40?
It has to be, let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about how we can make a difference and survive in a not scarcity sense. Yeah. Right.
Like technology is going to play a part. There are going to be breakthroughs. So we don't have to rely on everything we have right now, but we can't just like be like, we're just going to wait for that movie star to like come up with that perfect device that's going to save the world, because that's not realistic.
I don't know. Maybe Ashton Kutcher has something up his sleeves. I don't know.
He is from Iowa, so he cares about farmers.
So let's talk for a second, though. We talked about climate, and we've got the AMOC, which I love. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Current. Like, it's just such a thing. It's so strong, but maybe it's weakening. But now we can look at its western edge, and we'll figure it out. But from climate, let's get into your house and
my zone of knowledge.
Your zone over.
I am the weather goddess.
Coast. I mean, honestly, the last few weeks, spring is always weird, because spring, it's like weather comes and goes, and you get here in Portland, we always get hail in April, and it's it's like, okay, it's gonna happen, and I think it did just like last week. So, but there are the beautiful days and the cold days. And growing up in California, it was always a fear there would be an early frost, because that would destroy the cherry crops, because you have just, the flash freezes. And if the plants have already started blooming and producing fruit, it's done. Right.
Yep.
You just had something like that. What's going on over there?
Yeah, it impacted the Northeast. It happened part of the Mid-Atlantic. And we had 2 nights in a row where temperatures dropped down in a lot of places into the 20s. And so the National Weather Service actually back in 2023 did a pilot of new language because they've been doing this with a lot of different language that they do, is they want to simplify their messages. They realize that people are just confused. They're overwhelmed by all these, is it a watch? Is it a warning? Is it a blah, blah, blah? And so they
what are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing? What the heck? And so they wanted to simplify their messaging related to cold. And so they changed their messages specifically about freezing conditions. And they don't have a hard freeze warning, which is a term they used to use. Now it is just a freeze watch and a freeze warning. So freeze watch is something where it's watch, keep your eyes open, something might happen. Warning is it's happening. So a watch comes out a couple of days ahead of time. Freeze watches and freeze warnings are only put out during the actual time period when the growing season is happening. So you don't get a freeze warning in the middle of winter, which, makes a lot of sense. But they are really trying to look at agriculture and home gardeners, because that is those are the people who are going to be most impacted by these freezing temperatures. And so you can see, if you're a person who's watching the video, that they have a chart of different locations, because this actually is a pretty mountainous region where I live, which is right in the mid-Hudson Valley. We've got the valley floor, we've got fairly high elevations, we've got the Catskills Mountains and things like that. But different areas have different times when these freeze watches or warnings might be put out. And that is based on climatological data. And that is based on just where their growing season normally happens. And they have the ability to kind of fudge it one direction or the other. But once you get into that time period where, okay, there's a lot of plants that are going to be blooming, we know that's going to happen, then they'll put a watch or a warning out. And they put out a warning for 2 nights in a row. And I was pretty familiar with what was going on, because when I move around, I like to make friends with people who sell or make alcohol, because they're fun people. So I know a lot of people.
To choose your people.
They're really so they can combine. They're very interdisciplinary. They care about soil science. They care about weather. They care about history of the crop that they're making. They care about chemistry. They really are very Renaissance people-y. And they also like doing tasting events, which I also like. And so they are a number of the ones that I know the owners, or I follow the organizations on social media, and they were all posting about hey, just a warning, if you smell smoke or you see fire coming from our facility, don't worry. One place had actually a really large fire last year, and a big portion of their facilities burned down. So people were probably really sensitive to that particular place, but they are burning bales of hay and using super powered fans to blow that heat where the plants are, or they actually had helicopters flying around at low levels. And so they're using physics and the physics of the atmosphere to try to keep those plants alive. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to mix the atmosphere and trying to not let this layer build up of we know that hot air rises, right? That's why we have to crawl on the ground when there is a fire. And so if the cold air is sinking to the ground, that's where the plants are. And so if they can mix the air at night, they can save some, but not all of the plants. And it is also the freeze warning depends on, it has to be cold for long enough. It can't just drop to 32 for 15 minutes and be gone. And the colder it gets, the more dangerous it is. And so they're already saying that between those 2 nights, millions of dollars in loss, because of all those plants that had flowers coming out. And so it's really depressing, but yet it's an example of physics in action, of people knowing the atmosphere and fluid dynamics enough to understand what they can do. Or in Florida, they'll do things where they'll spray. Yeah, they'll spray water on top of the oranges. And it's because when water freezes, that process of freezing actually gives off heat when it changes from being a liquid into a solid. And so that actually keeps the plant a little bit warmer and protected. So farmers have all of these amazing strategies. We don't always give, I think, the farming and the agricultural world enough credit for how much science and scientific knowledge, even if they can't write the differential equation, they have this deep knowledge of what's going on and all of these strategies that the rest of us could learn from.
And I think it's really interesting because once upon a time, the idea was that they weren't interested in science and that they were just their farmers going and doing their own thing. But it turns out because everything they do relies on understanding the system that they work with better and protecting it more. They are some of the most science literate people that I have ever met.
And I think one of the big problems in the Midwest is that it was the family farmers. It's the people living on the land, seeing what happens, that know what it's like. But then when somebody from California buys out the land and then pays somebody to farm it,
somebody else to do it, then what do you do?
They're not doing crop rotations. They're just putting all the nitrogen in the soil that they can find. And that's why they're having increased cancer rates in Iowa because of all of these nutrients that they're putting in. They have the world's largest nitrogen filtration facility because of all of that.
But this is like a whole other conversation about, the science of agriculture and how, corporate farming and industrialization of farming is influencing the way that farming is done. But, back to the weather stuff, someone in the chat is saying once upon a time, I couldn't understand the difference between tornado watch and tornado warning. And, they just need a different system. Why don't they have low and high alert? So do they have, like you were saying, do they have a new system to warn people about the freezes that you're talking about on a regular basis?
So they've simplified it where they just do a watch and a warning. They just have a freeze watch and a freeze warning. And then the language of the freeze warning specifically says hard freeze, because that is a familiar term to people who grow things. But they don't have that low, medium, high, but in the weather forecasting for tornadoes, they are doing more of the risk levels. So they're talking about risk. They're also using this heat risk is a new term that they're using where they're talking about moderate, high, extreme risk. So they're trying to standardize things across the weather community so that the same language is being used, but it takes a long time to get
everyone saying the same thing and the public to understand what that means.
Yeah, we interpret it in our own way.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this document that you have from the National Weather Service that was for implementation in 2024, but going from wind chill advisory would be replaced with cold weather advisory. So instead of going from the specific language of there's going to be wind that makes it feel colder than it actually is. And so you have to understand what relative temperature means and how you experience it, which is so much.
Yeah. Cold is cold. It's going to be cold, people.
It's going to be cold.
Yeah.
And you can say it's going to be cold. Cold weather advisory. It's also going to be windy. You can add that.
You can add that in if you want to.
But cold, and then you have extreme cold plus the wind chill extreme cold warning. Yeah. Great. Simple. It's simple.
Elegant. Psychom 101. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. I like these. I like the simplification, but the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. It's not that anybody is stupid or that you're trying to make it sound stupid. It is just, come on, dude.
Don't make us work harder. Yeah.
Just make it easy. Yeah. So you're talking about all of the way that the weather people across the country talk about weather and getting people to understand. And the next story that I wanted to jump to is a story related to the way that animals actually understand what's going on in their environment. And a paper that was just published in cell.com, in Current Biology, researchers were looking at how in the Amazon different species talk to each other about threats. and different things in their environment. Who is paying attention to whom? And so these researchers published a nicely written, like for a general audience kind of article in The Conversation this last week. Ettore Camberlenghi and Ari Martinez. They are from, well, actually, Ettore is at Deakin University and Ari is at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And they went around, and I love this. They actually like went through the Amazon with birds of prey in one part of the work that they were doing. And they took these birds of prey and released them because they're trained to come back to their handler. And the bird of prey would go out and they would listen to hear what happened in the canopy of the forest. And in what they did, there's this. You can hear responses from animals in the canopy. And now the bird is heading back to its handler. And that was the end of that situation. But there were still birds that were responding in the canopy to this bird of prey, this falcon that had been released. And so in the situation here, what we have and what they discovered is that the altitude, similar to the atmosphere or mountains or whatever, the altitude, the height within the canopy, there are different groups of animals that live at different layers of the canopy. And they found that all the little animals that live in the understory, they could give a hoot. They don't care. They just kind of do whatever they want. They keep talking or they don't.
Not my problem.
Nope, not my problem. Doesn't matter. They don't pay any attention. But they found that everybody pays attention to these little, like 100-gram or less songbirds in the canopy. And when those birds start calling, everybody else will grab on and start calling as well. And they will.
So they're the canary in the coal mine in the canopy?
Yes. The canary in the canopy.
The canary in the coal mine in the canopy.
Yes.
We got it.
But they're not a canary. They are a small canopy species, which if I can find the name of these
Please tell
birds,
me it starts with a C.
It does not.
We need alliteration.
It's not. They're Monasa morpheus. So that's at least its own. That's its own. But these monasas, the monasas are the birds that kind of sell the danger to the rest of the animals. And it's not that they're selling it only to other birds. Primates within the canopy listen as well. And so the primates are actually paying attention to the alarm calls that are taking place. And the monasas are the birds that make everybody excited. But sometimes the primates get going and the monasas go, ooh, the primates are excited. And I think that's a big deal. And the monasas then will get excited. And then everybody will get excited. So the monasas are the internet hubs of the Amazonian canopy. So anyway.
Intriguing.
Yeah, but I just love the ones that are down in the shrubs at the bottom of everything. Like they can freak out. They don't care. If something happens up above, do not care at all.
I noticed also that their shrieks are at a similar decibel, and it makes me wonder whether they co-evolved to be able to hear each other, because different animals can hear different decibels of sound. And so I wonder, like, was there some sort of co-evolution that happened to make them able to hear each other in that message of warning?
Which is a fantastic question, because the Amazon is a very noisy environment. And so these alarm calls, these vocalizations are usually at a very high volume or amplitude, and they are within certain frequency ranges because they travel well within the canopy of all the leaves and everything.
Nice.
Yep. Good question. You were right on it. Yes. Yeah. And then from there, like there were another couple of stories related to the way that plants themselves exist in the world around them. And it turns out that, oh, hey, here's another study in scientific reports. Researchers out of MIT have basically simulated rain for plants and found out that seeds that are in like the upper levels of the dirt, like in a puddle or something, that the thumping, the sound of rain, the physical
vibrations.
vibration of rain,
Yep.
they feel it and they germinate faster. Those that respond, there are those cells, there are particular, I did not know this, they used submerged seeds of rice, Oryza sativa in this study, and they found that there are statoliths, which are little organs like the otoliths in our ears, where we have like cells that have little hard bits in them that when the gel shakes around, the hard bits move around and they go, oh, there's vibration.
There's
I
sound.
sense movement. La la la. These are in seeds, and the seeds sense the vibrations through these statoliths, and the statoliths start the process of germination.
What an evolutionary highlight.
So, but moving to this whole idea of, when is it freezing? When is it raining? When is something happening, right? And so...
when is it graupling?
When is it graupling?
I don't know.
Bringing it back.
That's
there
right.
No,
good word.
It's a great word. But in the press release for this, the researchers talk about a Japanese saying, which is there's a fourth Japanese micro season that's called "Falling rain awakens the soil." And you kind of, I love how that sounds, and I know it's Englishized or whatever, but there is a feeling of the spring rains come, right? And especially in places where you have freezes, where you have snow, where at higher latitudes, you have these environmental differences. But it's just, I think it's so interesting. I mean, here in Portland, it is just very rainy all the time. So I have a hard time understanding that. But in some places where, say, in North Dakota, everything's frozen and then it thaws, the rain comes, and the wheat can sprout. Yeah. There's something about that. And it's not just light. It's not just temperature. It's also physical vibration. Plants can hear.
What I wonder, though, with that is, so one of the graphics that the WaterWise team at the U of A made is about why strong, like heavy thunderstorms can actually be really bad during extreme drought conditions. Because when you have extreme drought conditions, what's happening underneath the ground is that there are the roots of the plants release this waxy substance. And you get a buildup of there's these microorganisms that will eat the wax, and you get a buildup of the wax when those microorganisms aren't there to eat the wax. You get this waxy layer. Would that waxy layer change the physics of the rain hitting the soil enough to actually change the sound wave? Because if you hit a hard piece of wood versus a soft piece of wood, it's going to be a different sound wave. And are they attuned to a very particular wave of energy? And could really dry soil actually be something that they can't hear because of the change in the soil hardness?
Yep. Yeah. I don't know if they have answers to this question.
That's the next question.
That's the next question. There's so
Don't
much
worry,
more.
There'll be plenty of drought to test it
right,
on.
let's go with it. And there's so many more questions to answer about how this works and why it works. It's not all species, probably. Which species and why and what environments and how does that all go together? And let's see. And then from there, let's talk about salmon on cocaine.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this.
You've been waiting for this story? Yeah. So researchers gave salmon cocaine on purpose
Like you do.
Yeah. And this
They were
is
done
not
giving it to
because,
spiders.
right. And if you know of the movie Cocaine Bear, this has nothing to do like with, let's see what happens if we do salmon and maybe we can make a sequel, right? I think it would be really funny. We've got Cocaine Bear, Cocaine Salmon, like whatever.
Snakes on a plane, Sharknado.
That's gonna
all
all the
going
things.
downhill.
The salmon, however, let's talk about water runoff into lakes, waterways, different places where fish that we eat, that we depend on, that we also just love are living, right? We've talked on this show a lot about prescription drugs and the fact that our water treatment programs are not made for filtering all the stuff from our toilets and our sinks and our gray water and putting it back into the world without these metabolites or even extras of pharmaceuticals that we took. Like our bodies, things leave them and they go into, here in Portland, the Willamette River. On those extra flood nights, right? You just, oh, yay. Our big pipe went over the limit. Ooh, we're just.
And then I get my Willamette Valley wine that has been fed by the moisture from.
That's different. That's different. That's going through the soil into a water table or at
little
least through
filtration.
The ground. It's getting filtered.
Yeah,
very different.
Goodness.
This is for people who are going fishing or who want to go swimming in the spring or whatever. But you want to go out and about and have a good time. But there are all sorts of like birth control pills, not pills themselves. Well, sometimes people throw things. What do you do when you get rid of your pharmaceuticals? Flush them, right? Bring them back to a particular disposal day, or you flush them.
Now they're saying just keep them in the bottle, make sure it's closed completely, and throw it away. That's the latest message.
That's okay. That's different, but okay. Don't flush them, but you used to flush them. But you don't need to worry about it. Our vitamins are everything we take into our bodies. It goes out and then ends up in the extras in the waterways. And so we have fish on birth control. We have salamanders on Adderall. We have, there's so much impact. And actually, the majority of study has been on legal drugs that we take and not on the illegal ones. So researchers decided that they wanted to find out what happens to fish, assuming that their tissues, their brain tissue, accumulate cocaine and the metabolites of cocaine in the way that we talk about the tissues of fish swimming in water, like bioaccumulating different substances.
I feel like if you spent money on cocaine, would you really be flushing it? Is that like just the accidental?
No, but if it is,
or
if you have if it's in your system and not fully processed, and you also have the metabolites of having ingested cocaine, then those metabolites also are ending up in the waterways.
Okay, and so that makes more sense than being like, I got a couple ounces too much. I mean,
that's like the cops are at the door. No.
Yeah, throw the baggies in quick.
I mean, we got to talk about like Miami and the Gulf of Mexico, like around there. Like, I don't know. But what they found is that they didn't put fish in little aquariums and put cocaine in the water. They gave them basically like implants. They gave them implants of cocaine and cocaine metabolites and nothing for the control group. And they released them into a lake in Norway. And they found, they were like, let's also see what they do. Where do they go? We know cocaine makes animals move. So let's see what happens. Guess what happened?
They were moving and grooving, and
yes, they were. Those fish
good times roll.
Those fish, the cocaine fish and the metabolite fish, they went way further into the north part of the lake than the control fish, and the metabolite fish as well. They also lived longer. So, which is wild.
They got more exercise.
The cocaine and the cocaine metabolite fish lived longer, but they were not in the places where the controls were in the southern end of the lake. And so you can go, okay, they're fine. It's great. They moved around. That's awesome. But honestly, the concern is that it changed their behavior and it made them go places and disperse further than they normally do. And there may be environmental differences between the north end of the lake and the south end of the lake that even though they lived longer, we don't know what's going to happen to their offspring. We don't know what's going to happen to the population as it expands in that way. And the
They're
fact
like
that
an invasive species in their own lake.
exactly. And the fact that they have not just moved around more in their traditional place of of being a salmon, it's indicative of it changing the behavior of the salmon enough to be disruptive to the reproductive behavior and survival of the species. But
And
we don't know.
Mentioned, like, what about the bears that ate those salmon? Are they now? Do we have bears on cocaine?
Very, very small quantities, but maybe maybe the bears around there, maybe, they had a big day.
I just hope they don't do it with the flying carp because they are a bad
Cocaine
enough
bear.
problem of flying up and like smacking people on boats. Imagine if they had cocaine in their system. Like, I don't think you can go on any bodies of water that have flying carp and not fear for your life. Like, they're wearing helmets now when they go fishing, some fishermen, because it's so bad.
Do not give cocaine to carp. That's all I'm going to say. Just everybody, maybe we should just consider places that carp are found. Make sure there's like filtration into the waterways. Do not put cocaine in those lakes or rivers. Come on.
And all the college kids are like, hey, let's go catch some salmon this weekend. Let's have a good time.
Oh,
no. Don't do it, kids. Don't do it. Go to a science fair instead.
Cocaine, salmon, don't do it. Yeah. So anyway,
but it'll be the next commercial. They'll have a Smokey the Bear, but he will be like high on cocaine from salmon.
Just from the salmon too. But I do think this is something that is interesting as well. Part of the research that they found, they had like an increase in the amount of cocaine initially upon release, which is probably related to the implant increasing the amount, but then it kind of dropped off for a bit and then it kind of boosted up again later on. And they're like, maybe we had like freezer issues that like impacted the tissue, but the levels are very similar to like what you measure in waterways where people live. So they're wondering if like there's actually like
contamination from
local
expelled
people. Yeah, urbanites. Yeah. So anyway,
that's special.
People, every time you flush, just know you're having an impact. That's just the truth right there. We're going to run through the last couple of stories here because you're on East Coast time. So I don't want to keep you up all night. We've had so much fun and we're getting to the end of things here. News story, new process for replicating DNA that is discovered in bacteria as a way for bacteria to be able to fight off phages, the viruses that attack bacteria. Do you know how DNA is replicated normally?
It splits, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get the matching pairs.
Yes.
And round two, was it mitosis? Am I getting my terms correct? Like, which one is it?
So you have the splitting, meiosis, and then mitosis is the doubling. And yes. But you're right. So traditionally, unzip the zipper, copy the DNA, ta-da, new DNA. We have the transcription process, which is RNA, which is then translated via proteins, the ribosomes, into proteins. amino acids. So we have these very set processes that we've been like, this is the only way that it works. And they just found bacteria who are basically like, I have a protein that I'm going to use my protein to make DNA. And that DNA, like it's backwards. It's instead of the transcription translation, so DNA, RNA, protein, right? Yeah. It's going protein, DNA. It's going backwards. And this is the only time they've ever found this mechanism ever, anywhere.
It makes me think about extraterrestrial life. Like we assume it's going to be carbon-based. We assume it's going to, have DNA that replicates. We're just making assumptions here because of what we've seen. And we don't even know so much of our own planet, like deep in the ocean. We haven't explored such a huge percentage of that.
And it seems what they've found is like CRISPR, which they've discovered to be very widespread. It's a bacterial defense. It's something that they're using now for genetic modification. This system, it's called DRT3, DIRT3. DIRT3, the quote is, it represents an all-in-one molecular machine for sequence-specific DNA synthesis.
That just sounds like a company that's going to go and have an American Chemical Society.
What's the name of your company?
They're going to have the webinar I'm going to. Yeah, DIRT3. We're a one-stop shop for.
But it's such a fascinating mechanism because there have been some artificial techniques that have been used to estimate what proteins could come from what DNA, and they've done backwards mapping using quote unquote artificial intelligence, LLMs, to be able to go from proteins to predict the DNA sequence that those proteins came from. And so there are programs that are doing this kind of genetic backwards mapping. And to think that this is something that's actually happening inside bacteria that we just found. Like it's wild. It's wild.
I think we wildly underestimate bacteria. Like they get such a bad rap and they're so impressive. Seriously.
They're tiny. They do everything. They are more prolific than we are. There we go. They will live forever. Bacteria. And I'm going to skip right to, I'm just going to keep moving actually. So it's time for you to talk. What I'm going to say very quickly is, everybody, thank you for being here for This Week in Science. I do hope you're enjoying the show. If you are, please tell a friend. And head over to TWIS.org, click on that Patreon link, help support the show in an ongoing fashion, $10 and more per month, and I will say your name. I'll thank you on air at the end of the show. And with that, we can't do it without you. Thank you for being here. And Sara, thank you so much for being here. And I want to bring it to the conversation that you wanted to have, Connect the Dots. Let's do it.
Yeah. So my podcast is Connecting the Dots with the Renaissance people, the multifaceted people. And what I love to do is I like to listen to conversations about the same topic that are happening in different realms. And I like to ask the questions like, what's similar about these conversations? What's different? What idea can I pull from over here and apply it over here? So I am editing my episode for next week, Wednesday, with Paula Croxon, who's a science communicator. And we were talking about storytelling. And she was talking about how she moved from being a researcher, a neuroscientist, and then she got involved with storytelling on the stage. And she talked about her grandmother's dementia and how people came up to her afterwards and said that was so powerful. And she decided, like, let's use this power of storytelling to tell science stories. And I just so serendipitously happened to come across two posts on LinkedIn in the last couple of days about research that is relatively recent, 2024 and 2025 papers. And so the first paper that I'm going to refer to is research and that was posted about by one of the co-authors. His name is Daniel Max Crowley, and he's a professor of human development and family studies, HDFS, and public policy. And he shared it in reference to universities. So it's all about how lived experience matters when you're telling stories, but specifically, they wanted to ask the question of what stories does a policymaker care about? And he was referring to how universities are having to reach out to policymakers to encourage them to support the work that they're doing as a university. And so in this study, they did 5 experimental trials. They had over 11,000 policymakers. And what they wanted to test was what influence did who the person talked to have. And it actually wasn't direct talking, it was sending an email. And then they looked at how much engagement was there with the email. And so if the policymaker got a message where the person who is sending the story was talking about their own lived experience, and in this case, they were talking about people who had had problems with drugs. And so if it was somebody who had actually lived through that, that was their own personal life story, then they saw almost twice, sometimes over twice the amount of engagement with that kind of email. If it was somebody who is involved with research about that and talking about their own research. However, if it was somebody's personal story that was being told by another person, the engagement dropped. And in some cases, it was by like 50% relative to if they hadn't used the story at all. So
that's huge.
And in both cases, they were telling the exact same story. In one case, it was I experienced this, and in the other case, it was they experienced this. And
so the they was someone else. You don't really know.
This is a person's story. And when he was posting it on LinkedIn, he was saying at a university, we have people who we hire to engage with these policymakers who are going to fund our university. They are telling the stories of our students, but how do we get those students in front of them? Because who tells the story matters in terms of how much engagement you're going to get. And I think for what Paula talked about, she didn't realize, she was like, oh, everybody has somebody in their life who has experienced dementia of some kind. But then they were like, you were talking about your grandma. I'm going with that, experiencing that too. It was so nice to hear somebody else talking about something that I've experienced. And so her message resonated and was so much more powerful. So that was really about like, how do we elevate the voices of maybe college students to talk to their policymakers, to their senators about like, why should you fund us?
Yeah. And this makes so much more sense as so when you have congressional hearings, right? And you have people who work and do certain things and they can talk from their own experience. I've been through this. This is my experience. Recently a friend's high school daughter was able to actually testify in a California congressional hearing on online bullying. And she went and told her story in front of, this, tribunal.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the working group, right? And she was part of convincing them to enact regulations that would help the bullying problem, right? Yeah. The online bullying, especially. So,
yeah. So, and what it does is,
and what I did was just told someone else's story, but
yeah. Oh, how meta of you. So in this case, it was emails. It was whether or not they like opened the emails and like responded to the email. So it wasn't even that like the people had to physically show up there for them to hear the pain in their voice or anything. It was like a difference of I versus they. And that kind of small thing, it's like, wow. But then let's say we have scientists as a science communication trainer who maybe aren't so great at telling their own story. Should I count on them to tell their story without any training? No, I as a science communicator really matter because I don't have to tell their story for them, but I still have the skill set of helping them craft a powerful story so that when they do tell their story, that policymaker can listen to it. And it's not crafting it so that I can tell it to somebody else. It's crafting it so that they can get it out in a way that they're comfortable with. Not everybody has to stand up in front of a committee. Some people can write, some people can do social media, you know, there are ways
whatever they're good at. Yeah.
So that's one story. Okay. We're talking about policy. We're talking about universities and who the messenger is. Now,
for the take home for anyone here who wants to talk to policymakers or anyone, if you want to tell a story, make it your story.
Yeah. Tell your own story. That's what matters. And it might be a universal story. It may feel like everybody's experienced it, but universal stories can be powerful too. So then the other one was about storytelling, but it was about listening. And so the person who posted, this is about research that came out in PNAS, which is the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, an article from February 2024. And it was a LinkedIn post by Kurt Gray, a professor of social psych at Ohio State University. And so he was not involved in the research, but he's written a book on that topic. And he had an image, and what it said was basically like, most people think that if you practice active listening techniques, if you really try to consciously listen to a person and engage with them and let them realize that you're listening, that you're more likely to persuade them to whatever you want them to think. And so these researchers recruited approximately 1,500 people, Americans, who were anti-immigrant. And they thought, well, who would be really good at persuasively telling a story to get them to change their mind about immigrants? And so they had trained canvassers, and they were talking to these people about undocumented immigrants who were getting in-state college tuition. And the goal basically was, okay, your goal is to change this person's perspective about these people. And there were two options. One option was that you could tell like a powerful story, a compelling personal story, maybe yours or somebody else's, probably most somebody else's. And then the other one was to practice high quality, non-judgmental listening. And actually there was a third. There were also some people who did that third option. And the really interesting part, listening did not actually persuade more people to change their mind. We always think, oh, well, if I'm an active listener, then they're more likely to, change their mind about whatever thing I'm passionately talking about. But that wasn't
because you're listening to them.
Yeah, because you're listening to them does not do it. No, what it does is it increases their connection with you. They have a more positive response to like, how did your conversation go? They feel more positively about that, but they didn't get actually persuaded to change their mind. It was that story that was told, that was the factor that could change someone's mind.
But at the story can change somebody's mind if you're in one conversation, right? And you're listening, you're persuading and then actively listening. What you're doing is actively trying to create a relationship or at least simulate being a human.
Yes.
So the person who is listening or who you're trying to persuade feels better about the interaction.
Yeah.
And they were nice and that was nice and it was great, but they're not going to be persuaded by you more. But what about the fact that maybe you got along because you listened and you heard them, and so you then could talk with them another time?
Yes.
And
that's what they pointed out.
Continue the conversation.
Exactly. That this could have been sowing the seed, to go back to our seeds, the seeds who can hear sounds. Yeah. Yes. Love seeds. So it could have been sowing the seeds for impact that could have happened at a later point in time. But if you've got this like one time, I'm talking to this person and this is my one chance to persuade them, the telling of the story is more likely to persuade them. And what I commented for both of those LinkedIn posts and tagged the other person's post in it. And I said, it's so interesting to connect the dots between these two very different conversations about storytelling. And the takeaway that I get from it is that we can't say a blank statement of, oh, you know what? Storytelling is the best practice. Like everyone should tell stories and that's going to fix all the world's problems. There is so much nuance to it. And you really have to be thinking about who you're doing it with, how you're doing it. And it just, we need professionals who are trained in communication. They have value in the world, whether it's science communication or any kind of communication. You should hire science communicators, all that great stuff. But that's the connecting the dots where I love to see two different areas having that conversations on the same topic who might not even know that they're both talking about the same thing, and say, hey, let me tell you what the left hand is saying, right hand. And then where do we go from there?
But I think that's one of the most beautiful things, right? Where stories overlap, like you started out with your Venn diagram, right? It's where do we find commonality with others? It's where this idea I've had about our understanding, we are in our bubble of perception, right? I know what I learn, what I see, what I think, what I hear, what I perceive, right? And in that, I make up stories about what everybody else does, and we have certain things we call facts or science or
capital T truth.
Capital T, exactly. But you don't have real agreement until your perception, you compare your perception with somebody else's. And the Venn diagram of how you overlap with others is that commonality and the shared reality of the world.
And that's why I am anti-niche and why I'm not about like super specialized. I'm about expansion, meet other people, go hang out with a bunch of octogenarians and read a play and talk to them.
Gosh,
go to a preschool and hang out with a bunch of preschoolers and talk about weather. Like get around to other people who are not like you and pop that bubble that surrounds you and get more expansive. Do a little bit more.
Yes. And so as Espada says, so are we saying there for science communication that we're sowing the seeds of love like Tears for Fears?
That's beautiful.
I think so.
Teardrops running down my face. Not fearful teardrops though.
No.
I love using gardening as a metaphor for like a bazillion things,
so many
including
things.
Like networking and community building, all that good stuff.
Yeah. I only had one more story left for the night, and really it was that serotonin can cause your tinnitus. So it might actually be a target for all of us as we get older who maybe listen to loud music or didn't, or maybe are taking antidepressants and other compounds in our lives that have given us, as some people pronounce it, tinnitus, this high-pitched screeching sound in our ears that is constant, and sometimes it makes other noises and does pressure things, and I have it going right now. I'm going to tell you, like I have it constantly. But tinnitus, there is a very dedicated serotonergic pathway for tinnitus, and it may be a target that can be used to modulate this impact. So yes,
what a relief would that be?
What a relief.
Are you signing up for this study? You're like, I want to. I won't be part of the control group though. I refuse.
No, I mean, but if only you could ask to be which group you wanted to be in.
I
right?
know. Wouldn't that be nice?
Something we get to
Not
do.
So
they're like,
gotta be double blind.
This is double blind, randomized, controlled. So you get what you get. And then you're like, but it didn't go away.
Gosh darn science. Why do you have to be as objective as possible, though objectivity completely is not possible?
Why do you have to be so sciencey, science? Jeez. Oh, no. Sara, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Like, this has been just
a delight.
It really was. I loved finding out so much more about you and then hearing your feedback on different stories and having, the focus on earth sciences, also having your input there is just wonderful. And so it's just great to have your input. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
I'd love to be back again sometime.
I would love to have you back. That'd be so great. This is my thing is like, okay, I'm gonna make a short list of the people that I can call.
Oh,
Do you want
that's pretty special. Like, can I put that on my LinkedIn bio on the short list for
on Kiki's short list?
on Kiki's short list? That's going to be part of my headline. I'm not even putting in the about section.
There we go. No, about that's it. That's it. Everyone will know. Everyone will know. It's fine. So I want you to let everyone know where they can find you, your podcasts, all these things. So where can we find you?
So the number one way to follow me is LinkedIn. I am Sara Kobilka, no H, because I'd be Sarah or Sarah if I had an H. So LinkedIn is one of the best ways to find me. I post about everything. My website is Ren with one N, womanconsulting.com. And then you can find my podcast, Connecting the Dots with the Renaissance People, on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. On my main page, you will see a button called Keep Me in the Loop, and that is how you can sign up for my newsletter, where I go off on tangents, because tangents are wonderful, and I share about my podcast, and I give you behind the scenes, all the good stuff, juicy stuff of what's happening in the world. So sign up for that. I also picked my particular website set up because you can do a ticker at the top. And so every time I do a blog, its title comes up as a new ticker. And I get great joy out of that as a former TV person.
Yeah. You're like, there we go. This is exciting.
Yeah, it helps. It makes me so happy. And my podcast, like I said, comes out every other Wednesday. And I even do a separate thing, which is called Queued for Thought. Like that, Queued for Thought. And what it is a curated podcast list. And what I do is I find 3 or 4 podcasts that are all talking about that same topic. And then I curate them into your own list that will automatically, if you sign up on that page, it'll automatically add those. And I do an intro episode and a reflections episode, and I connect the dots between the topics. So survivalist insights was the most recent Queued for Thought topic.
I think that's really neat. I haven't heard of anyone actually doing that before. They have like podcast crossovers. And so like you're here tonight, like being here, there's all sorts of collaborations and different things that people do, but I've never heard of somebody curating related podcasts to the topic that I mean, I love that. I think that is, I mean, and it's just helpful for those people who want to go down a rabbit hole and have time. That's great.
Someone told me that I'm like a librarian for ideas. I curate inspiration.
There we go. I like it.
There we go. Sean Gritter's giving you credit. Props to you.
Thank you so much for being here. We're gonna do the end of the show now. You're up for it? We're gonna finish this out.
Biggity bam.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you, everyone in the chat room, for being here and chatting, telling me about the fact that my YouTube ads were too harsh. I had no idea that setting was on. Thank you. I think I fixed it. I won't do that again. Everyone, I love that you're here. We love getting your in real time feedback to the stories that we're talking about, to the conversations that we're having. It just accentuates the whole thing. If you're not here in real time, I just love the fact that you are here right now listening or watching. Thank you for being a part of what we're talking about and spending your time with us. I mean, that's an investment and I truly appreciate it. Fada, thank you so much for your help on the show notes, social media. Couldn't do it without you. Gord, Arnlore, others who helped to keep the chat room nice places. I saw somebody earlier help out in the chat. That was awesome. Really appreciated that. This is how we keep this is a great place for us all to be and to hang out together. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, thank you for editing. This is all not possible without any of you, and especially not without our Patreon sponsors. So without further ado, I need to read all these names off and say thank you to Aaron Anathema, Adam Mishkan, Alan Viola, Ali Goffin, Andrew Swanson, Artem, Arthur Kepler, Bob Calder, Bob Coles, Brendan Mish. I can't do it tonight. Brendan Minish, Brian Carrington, Chris Wozniak, Christopher Dreyer, Christopher Rappin, Craig Landon, Craig Potts, Daryl Myshak, Dave Wilkinson, David Youngblood, John Munnis, EO, Eden Mundell, Eric Knapp, Flying Out, Fredis 104, Greg Burton, Lattimore, Greg Briggs, Jack Jason Olds, John Atwood, John McKee, John Ratnaswamy, Jenny Gridley, Ken Hayes, Kent Northcote, Kevin Pearchan, Kevin Reardon, Kurt Larson, Alan Makes, Lauren Gifford, Mary Gertz, Marjorie, Mark Hethenflow, Mark Jenkins, Noodles, Package Pecoraro, Paul D. Disney, Paul Ronovich, Philip Shane, Pierre Velazar, Richard Badge, Barbara Lornan, Robert W. Farley, Rodney Lewis, Rudy Garcia, Remy Day, Sean Clarence Lamb, Bruce, Stephen Alberon, Steve Leisman, Sue Doster, Teresa Smith, Stony Seal, and Vegard Chefstad. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. Sometimes I do it better and sometimes I do it worse, Sarah.
No judgment. No judgment.
Anyway, on next week's show, for those of you who might be interested in having me stumble over your name at the end of the show, head over to TWIS.org and click on that Patreon link. Support us at $10 or more per month, and I will do the best that I can. I really would love your support. On next week's show, hopefully Blair will be back and feeling better. I do hope. Don't miss it.
You don't want to miss it. They're going to be back. TWIS will be back on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time, which is 11 p.m. for you Eastern time folks like me. And they're going to be broadcasting live from their Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels. So lots of options.
Yeah, and if you want to listen to us as a podcast later, just search for This Week in Science wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe too.
Sharing is caring, folks. So for more information on anything that you heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for the newsletter. And who doesn't love a good show note? That's like the running gag of my podcast is show note, take a drink. Best thing ever.
Well, show notes. It'll be in the show notes. We love your feedback. If there is a topic or something else you'd like us to cover or address or a suggestion for an interview, make sure that you let us know on one of our social media accounts. TWIS Science is usually what it is, or This Week in Science, or you can send us an email if you have my email. Just, let me know. Make sure you put TWIS in the subject line so your email doesn't get spam filtered into, where's it going to get spam filtered into? It will get spam filtered, into one of those cocaine heavy salmon who's going to swim really far away, and I'm never going to get the gosh darn email ever again, because who chases a salmon like that? He'll get eaten by a bear. Jesus.
Bear's going to have the best day of his life, but you won't, because your email wouldn't have gotten through. No. Well, I can promise you they really look forward to discussing science with you again next week, because this is like the place to be. And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. Science is coming your way, so everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science, This Week in Science, This Week in Science, This Week in Science.